Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk latency in electronic music here. Now, I don't have a degree in physics or electronics or engineering, so I'm not going to be able to explain at a component level why latency happens, or what the state of the art in the industry is and what they're doing to mitigate latency, or any of the theoretical aspects of it, like what's the lowest amount of latency possible on a piece of gear. But I will say that just about every piece of digital gear has it. Whether it's bad enough to distract you from playing is a whole other thing. But if you're sensitive to latency, like I am, some of these things just may not work for you. I remember I was extremely critical of the HX 3 last year with the Virtual Capo block because the latency was so bad that it was untenable. I could not use it because it was distracting. I need that immediacy when you hit. So I encourage you to take my results and analyze them for yourself and perform these tests yourself. If you think that my results are off, or if it's bad science, I encourage you to do it yourself. Give me some feedback. I'm gonna leave comments open on this video because I want to know the best way to go about doing this, or if you find something completely different. There's a link in the description where you can download the Logic packages so you can analyze the raw data that I was using. It's almost a full gig worth of audio files. There's about 25 or 26 files there for you. Plus, that same folder will have all the image files if you trust the way I did it, but you want to double check to see how I measured it. So I encourage you to check my science. The way that I did it is I close mic'd the guitar strings with the Beta 58 directly into the interface, and then I used what's called a guitar triller, which is this little doohickey my friend got for me a couple years ago. Haven't found any use for it for music, but I liked it this time because what you can do is you can quickly smack the strings like the reflex hammer at the Doctor, so you get that nice, sharp, distinct transient attack. And I thought that would be the best way, rather than some clunky strum or trying to play something and line up sound waves. No, I just smacked it once and then analyzed where the microphone waveform was versus where the guitar output waveform was. Now, I will say right off the bat, spoiler, a guitar straight into the interface, there's no detectable latency. I zoomed in on the waveforms and it looks like it comes out exactly the same time, which one would expect. Of course, there's going to be a little bit of latency going into the DAW, but because I recorded both these waveforms simultaneously, that can be discounted. So you don't have to think that there's any latency from the microphone or the actual guitar straight into the interface. And then so what I did is I tried the guitar through a bunch of different gear: the Digitech Drop, the Eventide H9, the HX 3, the HX Stomp, and their new polyphonic pitch shifting, and even the Relay G10S wireless by Line 6. And there is latency in all of this stuff. So I encourage you to stick around, and if you don't want to watch this whole video, because my discussion is about 15 minutes long after this, then just download the files, look at them yourself, and I think there's going to be some eye-opening stuff here. My biggest revelation with this was to discover I essentially put numbers to what I already felt. Like if I felt latency was really bad, like you'll see the Eventide H9, if you just use like full wet polyphonic pitch shifting, the H910, H945 algorithm, it's bad. It's like 200 and some milliseconds. But the Variax was actually very, very good. It gets noticeable in the acoustic models and when you start incorporating pitch shifting, but it's still very usable. It's not going to be distracting. So that's the biggest issue, is if it's going to be distracting or not. So stick around. Let me know what you think. Check out my work. Give me some feedback. And do these tests for yourself. All right, so let's talk latency. So pictured here are the units that I tested. We got the Eventide H9 Max, the Digitech Drop, the Variax. My particular Variax looks similar to the one at the bottom right over here, the JTV 59, which is like the Les Paul style one. Tested the Virtual Capo in the Axe FX3. We tested the polyphonic pitch shifting in the Helix HX Stomp. And the for shits and giggles, we tested the Line 6 G10S wireless just to see how much additional latency a wireless system might add to your system. So moving right along, the method that I did, as previously noted, I close mic'd the strings, and then that microphone went directly via XLR into my Mo2 M4 interface directly into Logic. And then I plugged a guitar cord into a guitar and then plug that cord directly into the interface as well, and that went into Logic. So they were being recorded simultaneously. My baseline was just the magnetic pickup straight into the interface. So, as you might imagine, there was zero latency. I guess theoretically there was some, but I couldn't detect any, no matter how closely I zoomed in on the waveforms and compared them. So this is what to look for in these images right here. Up at the top, you're going to have the name of the test. I missed the first couple, so like this one is my baseline, but it says Untitled. But after, I think, the second or third one, they're all titled correctly. And then you'll notice the top waveform is the microphone input, and this bottom waveform is the guitar input. Now, on the ones where there are latency, or where it is detectable, there's a third waveform at the bottom, which is basically just the guitar output waveform zoomed in. So I would encourage you to check out these files. You can look at the image files themselves, the screenshots that you'll be seeing here, or you can even download the Logic audio packages of each of these tests if you want to. If you think my methods of recording were decent and you just want to maybe you have a better way to gauge the latency other than zooming in and highlighting the difference from when the microphone signal starts to when the guitar signal starts. I just encourage you to double check my methods, and no science is good without falsifiability. So the first one I tested was the Line 6 Variax, and again, mine is the JTV 59, similar to what's posted here. As you might imagine, magnetic pickups, 0 milliseconds latency. The electric guitar modeling. Now, I tested the Spank model, and I got 0 milliseconds. You'll notice some latency starts creeping in with the acoustic guitars, and especially when things are being down-tuned. So we'll come back to the slide again. But so yeah, Variax magnetic, no detectable latency. Or I'm sorry, no observable latency, I should say, because definitely not detectable. So I tested the Spank. I didn't test all the other guitars. There's a chance that maybe some of the other electric guitars or some of the models, particularly maybe the 12-string models like the Rickenbacker, might have latency, but I didn't test it. I just kind of wanted to get an overview. So the acoustic 6-string models, when latency first starts creeping in there, you'll see down at the bottom there, the bottom waveform, there's about 8 milliseconds. The 12-string model puts a little bit more, and I imagine that's because it's already doing some pitch shifting as it is before you even introduce any additional down tuning. So about 12 milliseconds. It's still not bad. It's very, very playable. Once you start kicking in the down tuning, that's where even the electric guitars start noticing. You start seeing some latency. It's not bad. It's definitely playable, but at 19 milliseconds, you can feel it a little bit. It's not gonna screw you up. It's not gonna, if you're playing, rhythm guitar in a band, it's not gonna mess you up. But it may be untenable if you're doing very fast shredding or something where you need extreme precision. But for what it does, it's a very, very useful tool, and it's not bad at all. Acoustic 6-string half down. That's a little bit more latency because you have, it was about 8 milliseconds plus whatever, 8 milliseconds for the acoustic model plus apparently about 16 or so for the down tuning. Acoustic 12-string half down. That's about the same. And then the electric and octave down. It's more or less the same. It's a little bit more than just down tuned a little bit. I don't know enough about the electronics behind it to know if it's more processing power to get something tuned down an octave versus a half step, or how it exactly works. I feel like the math would probably be easier when you're discussing octaves, but I don't know. Okay, acoustic 6 half down, or I'm sorry, octave down, 23 milliseconds. Acoustic 12-string octave down, 27 milliseconds. When you're talking bringing the tuning down by an octave, or some of these more extreme settings, the latency almost no longer becomes the issue. It starts to become the tone and the artifacts that are the issue. Even if latency is still really good, it just may not sound good. But that's to each user's taste to decide for themselves. The next one I tested was the Digitech Drop, and very simply, it had really good latency. 20 milliseconds for half step down, and only 22 for an octave down. This was the half step down, and this was the octave down. So the next one I tested was the HX Stomp poly pitch shifting, and here's an overview of my latency results right here. Blank preset, about 2 milliseconds. So just the time it takes the guitar to be processed through the Helix into into the output and into the interface is about 2 milliseconds. So assuming you have nothing else going on, completely blank preset, you're going to have about 2 milliseconds of latency just using the HX Stomp. I don't have a full Helix on me, or LT, or the new HX Stomp XL to determine if it's any different, but I imagine it's going to be about the same for a blank preset. Half step down, a little bit worse than the Digitech Drop, and octave down about the same. Now, the Stomp can do 2 octaves down. It sounds like absolute dog shit, but it can do it, and at a reasonable latency. I feel like my test may not have been the best method to test the 2 octaves down, because it's not looking for that particular signal, but I think it worked. You can check out my files and decide for yourself. So yeah, this is just plain blank preset. This is the pitch shifting. So at the top it says poly mono half down. Now I wrote that because there's no stereo polyphonic pitch shifting. It's only in the monophonic effects, and I felt that might be confusing if I were trying to say like Helix monophonic polyphonic shifting. So just know that for the test, there is no stereo polyphonic pitch shifting. 23 milliseconds at a half step down, and around the same, but maybe a little bit less for an octave down. And again, I don't know why it seems to be a little bit less for the octave sometimes in these tests. Again, I think it might have to do with the math involved in the algorithm. Just easier working with doubling or halving numbers. And 2 octaves down. Yep, 2 octaves down was roughly more or less the same as the octave down. There's the results again. Okay, now, I was extremely critical of the Fractal Audio Systems Pitch Block's Virtual Capo last year around this time, before they released the update to it that made it really, really good. I wish I had an old version of it, because it'd be dramatically different. To me, it was basically unusable using a half step down. I think a half step down, I was getting between 45 and 60 some milliseconds. But with this, again, a blank preset, just the guitar going through the Axe effects, going to an input block, straight through to an output block, into my interface, 2 milliseconds. I think that's going to be about the theme when it comes to these modelers. Between 2 to 3 milliseconds, just for just for signal processing. Half step down, 23 milliseconds, very usable. I've been using this on the road, well, not on the road, but in my gigging band for about a year and change now that they've changed it. Never needed to buy a Digitech Drop pedal. So I also tested it with the max tracking. There's a dial you can focus more on tracking versus fidelity of the sound, and if you go more towards tracking, it's going to be a little bit faster, but it's going to be at the cost of some artifacts in the sound. Now, at the octave down, I got 81 milliseconds. This was kind of shocking, because then at 2 octaves down, I got only 21 milliseconds. Again, baseline 2 milliseconds. Half down, 23 milliseconds. And you'll notice like the waveform seems to change dramatically versus what a normal magnetic pickup would show. An octave down, 81 milliseconds. And I don't know why the waveform looks so fucked up like that. Again, I encourage you to do this test yourself or review my results. Then 2 octaves down was 21 milliseconds. Overall, I found the Virtual Capo on the XFX to be very usable. This is the max download or down tune, and this is this is half down max tracking. This was just my additional little test. So yeah, a little bit faster than not max tracking. I left the dial basically at noon for the non-max tracking for all the other tests. So here's the review once again. Okay, the Eventide H9. So this one was a doozy. This is easily the worst offender out of any of them. The Eventide H9 has great reverbs, great delays, but I'm not crazy about the pitch. I use this to record parts in one album just as like a doubling or like a harmony effect, and it does well for that. There's still the latency that you can feel, and obviously you can see the numbers right here are not very flattering, but H9's been around for a while. Lots of people use it. Lots of people love it. They're still dropping new algorithms here and there. So I would not use the H9 for polyphonic pitch shifting, though. That's my advice with this. These are the settings that I used. The one on the right is the half step down, and then the one on the left is the octave down. Now, with the mix at 0%, and it's just the dry signal, again, we're looking at about 2 milliseconds of latency, just going through the H9, basically no affected signal being sent out. Imagine if it was on true bypass, then it'd basically be instantaneous. Half step down, 220 milliseconds. That's the baseline. Yeah, 220 milliseconds. This is absolutely untenable. So I do not recommend using this for polyphonic pitch shifting. 2 octaves down, just really bad. Yeah. And very, very simply, the Line 6 G10S wireless signal or wireless system, dry signal about 5 milliseconds. So if you use, I had a G50 to test, but when I went to plug it in and turn it on, it stopped working. It worked my last gig, but then I went to use it this morning and it does not work. So I have a support ticket in with Line 6. Hopefully we'll get that resolved. But you can imagine, I don't figure too many wireless systems vary wildly here. I'll bet you're looking probably at between 3 to 8 milliseconds for just about all the wireless systems. So if I'm doing my G10S wireless system into my XFX, before I induce any pitch shifting, I'm already looking at about 8 to 10 milliseconds of latency. Very usable. You're probably not going to notice it around 10 milliseconds. Probably as it starts to creep towards 20, 25, 30, that's when it will start to become, you'll lose that immediacy. And that's when it starts to become distracting for you to play, at least in my experience. All right, so that was it. What'd you think? Is it sound science? Am I way off? Did you get something different? Again, my biggest takeaway is that this gear is very usable. its latency to me is usable up until, I would say, probably about 20 some milliseconds. After that, it gets really bad. And even around the 20 millisecond mark, I'm still thinking I'm just going to use this for rhythm guitar. Like, I would not try to shred at 20 milliseconds latency. As you saw, the baseline latency for an AXE-FX with no other blocks running other than just input and output block is about 2 milliseconds, about the same for the Stomp and the H9. So any of these multi-effects pedals, probably baseline is going to be about the same, probably between 2 to 4 milliseconds. So once you start incorporating the line, like a wireless system, that adds some more latency. Once you start incorporating the wireless and a like on the Variax, if I used an acoustic and then down tuned it and then went the wireless and then into my AXE-FX, I mean, you're piling on the latency. So it's really a matter of personal taste what you can tolerate or not. So I hope this video has been helpful. I'm sure it's been boring, and I'm sure you're sick of my voice by now, but I thank you for watching, and I encourage you to run these tests and let me know your own results. Thanks, guys.